Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Nationalism, the origins of the First World War, or the war to end all wars, or the Great War, 1914-1918. Now, just a recap here by Jonathan the Historian from the last couple episodes, if you watch it. If not, like I said, it's a free world. Put it on play, listen, whatever. Okay, whatever floats your fancy. Even it's funny kind of things today, people watch people eating. Very educational. Alright? History will tell you lots about how people are stupid. Now, and what our minds can comprehend. It's like, yeah, there's actually ones, it's like the fireplace one. People sit there and put on the fireplace on your TV. What's up with that? Anyway, we're going to get back to nationalism. Now, last time we left off, just a little recap, nationalism had a lot of building blocks and seeds spread throughout the course of ancient and medieval history. But as you recall, there's a lot of building blocks. But the problem is, there was no mortar to keep that structure from growing. It collapsed. Or other words, you could put it, a lot of seeds were spread with the senses of nationalism, concepts of nationalism, but it wasn't really able to prosper in those environments. It couldn't take root. Now, it didn't really start to get the right environment and conditions to grow until the French Revolution, and Napoleon spread the seeds. Alright? The first tree grew of nationalism in France, and then Napoleon decided to take those seeds and spread it all across Europe. All over, the nationalism seeds spread, right? The seedlings plot, as you remember back in a few episodes. Now, it's funny how nationalism today, we don't take it and think about it. It's almost programmed into us through our education system and our practices and our social values through TV and social media. It's bred right into us, and we don't even realize it. The day you do realize it, it's funny. You see it on TV, you see it on the news, you hear it in people's conversations, even if you're out taking a walk through the park. You hear them a lot, alright? What's going on in the States right now is that. What's going on in Iran right now is interesting nationalism at its finest. Alright, you got thousands of people dead. It's like the French Revolution. They're trying to overthrow the government. They're trying to bring back a free state. They're just giving it. They're giving their lives for this stuff. That is extreme nationalism. And remember, nationalism and patriotism are two different things. Nationalism is patriotism on steroids. Alright? Superiority. Inferiority. Alright? Now, nationalism was the main driving force right after that to all the events, many of the events that took place on the European stage. And in the 1820s and 1830s, we've seen the Greek Revolution of Independence, or the Greek War of Independence, away from the Ottoman Empire, as well as the Serbian revolts and rebellions to break away their shield from the Ottoman Empire. Now, one thing about nationalism, it is a very corrosive and cancerous agent to any imperial dynasty. Okay? Or any imperial entity, alright? Or political power, empire, alright? Colonial, landlocked, all kinds. Now, because, and this is exactly how politics works of the nature of things, alright? And not with David Suzuki. Remember what they called the Ottoman Empire? The sick man of Europe. Well, it's kind of funny, they call him the sick man of Europe, and then you introduce this agent that causes cancer within the empire, and it starts losing parts. Greece, Romania, Serbia, Albania. All this is coming. Okay, Egypt was already lost. Alright, before it had its own self-autonomy within the empire before this point. So, it's amazing that that's how you can compare it to. It's exactly. It wasn't a vaccine. It was a cancer. It was the perfect agent for that old sick man of Europe to catch a cold with this idea, and it just demolished it. Alright? And it finally ended its life, pulled the plug after the First World War. Nationalism. But with death brings new life, right? Now, nationalism was pretty much the main driving force in the next big step in Europe in nationalism and how it affects reach of the First World War. It really takes place in the 1830s. And these are one of my funnest and most interesting things, okay? We're going to talk about a few of the events that took place during that time, 1930 to 1932. This was a series of revolutions and revolts that took place in a few countries within the European continent. The great thing about this is, we're going to talk about the July Revolution of France. Now, remember how France could make up their mind? We want republic. Nah, let's go back to monarchy. Nah, we want republic again. They couldn't make up their minds, and even by this time, they're still doing the same thing. So the July Revolution really shapes France. Alright? They want the Bourbon dynasty and the Bourbon kings back in power. They want monarchy. Even constitutional monarchy, but they want monarchy back in place. Sweep of the republic. Alright? It was pretty much a war between liberal nationalism and royalism. Put it that way. You had an ultimate clash of happening in France. France became very unstable by this point. So, the revolution really pitted a lot of liberal ideals like freedom of press, representative government, freedom of speech, liberty, fertility, right? Remember the tri-colored flag, right? Blue is liberty, white, what do you think that one is? Equality, and red is fertility. The main three ideas of the French Revolution that sponsored liberal nationalism, right? Now, they were all pitted against, at this point, Charles X. Charles the Lovely X of France. So this really starts with his legitimate policies and his conservative policies that he issued within the government. Now, I love this because people hit the streets and they call it the July Revolution. One hell of a hell to have a SummerSlam party. Let's have a revolution. I love the French at this time. Oh, it's the summer, it's July, it's beautiful. We got lots of food. Everything's, well, not food, but yeah, you know what? It's nice weather for a revolution. Let's have at her. The July Revolution. All right? Now, they thought to restore monarchical rule. All right? They wanted to store this back to that Napoleonic national consciousness. They wanted to go back to that. And they're fighting to restore this. Eliminate it. Okay? Even this time, all the national symbols. Symbols are important. We mentioned this many times. All right? Now, remember I just mentioned the tri-colored flag. That was banned by the Bourbons. If you had one of those, you're going to jail. Some incidents, death. Imagine waving a flag like this. Now, same thing that happened in Iran. You're waving the old Iranian flag. Well, you're probably going to get shot down pretty quick by the government. So, either or. Same thing happens in lots of places in the world today. So, now, why would it be important? Is the ultimate question, right? Now, the Bourbons need to get back in power. They were one of the most powerful, but not like the Habsburgs or the Romanovs. They were up there. They were one of the big monarchy dynasties of Europe. All right? Not really like, haha. It's one of those things where the victors crush down that stuff. And they keep it low key, right? Especially a lot of British historians. But if you look at French historians, they really bust this up because it's part of France. France's history. It's very important. Now, one thing the flag was banned, it was the funny thing is that this flag went through the streets. People would run out and actually follow it and start chanting. And I mean, this symbolized unified France and resistance. That's the French flag, sovereignty, right? Freedom of press, all the values and everything that the French Revolution stated and fought for, stowed in that flag as a symbol. It was like getting educated in a heartbeat, because you see that flag and you're like, I know everything that flag stands for. I'm pissed. Let's go. Right? Let's go. So the popular uprising became something else, okay? And it really did. So you had a lot of partisan workers hitting the streets, students especially. This is notorious in modern times. A lot of movements is sponsored right at the universities. It always has. So a lot of social movements throughout the course of the last 150 years, longer, I would say 300 years, a lot were involved with university students. Okay? This is where the new generation of hierarchy is born. And this is where the ideas are exchanged and created in a cauldron. An orgy of knowledge. And when they come out, they're very aroused by the new world that they can put in front of them. Right? Or see the injustices and make them right. But I'm not going to get into the movements where it all starts with university students. But they were involved also in this July Revolution in France. It really takes place in Paris, a lot of it. But hey, alright? So you had people hitting the streets of Paris. Automatically, it's amazing how riots start to happen back then, especially in France. They automatically start building barricades in the street. It's just like it wasn't planned. Today, you would have social media. Okay, on this day, at this time, at this place, we're all going to get together, get your banners, get your paint on, get your war paint going. We're going to hit the streets and protest. Back then, they didn't have that crap. People just naturally flocked out of the houses and streets. Just one group of people started it. They start naturally building barricades, waving the tri-colored flag. Right? But in this case, they weren't really doing that, okay? They were fighting for liberty, equality, and fertility, alright? So there's a big clash between the two parties. Alright, you have the conservatives, liberals, beating the shit out of each other. Not really you see in Ottawa. This is how back in France in 1830 it should have been done. Should be going in Ottawa. Because they were duking it out in the streets, killing each other, beating the piss out of each other, roaring at each other, belittling, taking everything, right? Oh, the time to be alive was then. Alright, today it's just upright boring. One person dies in ice, the whole country's in uproar. That's good to see what happened in America. But back then, one death ain't gonna stop us. We're all going. If we all die, that's fine. Like what's going on in Iran. So, all against the armies of Charles X. Alright? Alright? So, what's going on? What's going on in Iran? Right? So, they're dying by the thousands over there. Not hundreds. Thousands. Dying for liberty. Alright? The price, liberty or death. Right? They're really putting that over there right now. They want to change and they want it now. Alright? Now, one thing about the successful overthrow, and this eventually does happen, they actually do overthrow Charles. They win. Okay? The liberal side wins. They overthrow Charles X. Now, one thing about this action, I want you to ask your question, what's this show the rest of Europe? Alright? Every action has a reaction. It's important to see what this shows. Alright? We live in a time where this should be applied. Everything that Trump did in 2026, what does that show the rest of the world? What Russia did, what does it show the rest of the world? Okay? This is an occurring thing that always happens throughout the course of history and even in the future. And as a citizen, and as a person living on this planet that we got to deal with all this shit, you got to realize this. And keep that in mind when you understand history, okay? You apply it to present day. You apply it to now, the knowledge and the times. Now, One thing about overthrowing this, it was a very popular nationalist uprising and movement in France during the July Revolution. Short-lived, but it ultimately changed and took out and defeated Charles. This was huge, all right? Took the monarchy back to the republic. Liberal ideals prevail again. Now, this showed 100% concrete, the statistics were all together, that it showed the rest of Europe and everyone else that was in Europe that this is a success. All right? These movements can secede. All right? Can secede. Even against the imperial conservative powers of Europe. This stuff can secede. It gave them inspiration, right? And it gave them an example to follow. Now, the problem is it's going to be switched back here in a bit. All right, because Napoleon II is going to show up. Oh, okay, well, that was a failed attempt. Well, let's try it again, because they do try it again. It's like, well, if we see it before, we shall see it again, right? That's where that concept comes from. It's great to see when it's on a massive scale and a massive population. On an individual scale, everybody does it, but when you take it on a collective aspect, that's magic, right? That's magic, right? Now, so because of what happened in the July Revolution, okay, in France, this inspired things to pretty much the November uprising that takes place in Poland and what takes in Belgium right across the border. Now, I love Belgium during this time. Now, this is where Belgium actually has its revolution, okay? Now, on August the 30th, 1830, is where it all starts. The events that just happened just a month, not even 2 months before, that happened in France. It was all wrapped up. The Belgians are looking across the window, through the window. They're like, hey, look at that, boys. They can do it. Huh. It's time to change Belgium. Gather our independence. And this is exactly what they do. They're inspired by what the French did. Because it takes place the next month. Right? It's wrapped up, however. Now, one thing about how this revolution starts is one of the greatest things in the world. Did you ever go to a movie or a theater play and get really aroused that you got out of the theater and were like, yeah! When I seen Expendables, I didn't get to come out there and be like, yeah, let's go bust some stuff. Let's take down the government. Nobody's like, yeah, it was a good movie. They talk about it, they leave. I love the Belgian Revolution. It's one of my favorite revolutions. It's most funny, okay? How can something so simple overthrow an entire government and change a whole nation's future? All right? You know the small things matter? Well, this is pretty much one of these small things. It's an opera. All right? It's a play, opera play. This is what triggers revolution. Did you ever go to an opera and come out and feel really like, I want to go to Ottawa and overthrow the Liberal government? No. You don't feel that, do you? And this is what I love about this, because it really triggers and it develops like Belgium national identity by this point. It became a symbol of it, all right? Because, and this is very important, it goes many morals and lessons here. This opera had a lot of themes in it, all right? Themes of oppression. You witnessed in the opera. We're going to talk about what the opera stood for. All right? And this resented really deeply among the audience. Because they were felt oppressed. They were conquered. All right? They felt ruled over. There was no freedom. Their monarchy was in the shitter. Okay? And plus, at the same time, they're being ruled by the Dutch. The Netherlands, their neighbor. They're being ruled by the Dutch. They had enough. They go into the opera, and literally when they storm in the opera, this is where it just hits the streets. From an opera. Simple as watching this inspired, written, magnificent opera piece. Alright? And it's legendary in Belgian history, and if you go to Belgium, I think Belgium should know this famous opera that started their road to independence from the Dutch. An opera. Inspired by an opera, literally come out of the theater, one of the theaters, and this is where the revolution started. Literally. People coming out of the pitchforks. Man. Imagine if you were there at the time. You'd be thinking a bunch of people just raring to go, coming out screaming revolution, coming out of the opera. I'm like, that was a horrible play. Or man, that wasn't no opera. Like, you gotta think about this. Right? It's pretty neat how this happened. Alright? I love how this happens. Alright? And this takes place 1930. August the 30th, this is the date it happens. Alright? Now, they desired Belgium independence. Okay? This sets Belgium up. And if you know your First World War, this is where it's key. Right? Belgium has a really strong sense of nationalism at this point, and the opera really speaks it out, okay? It was awesome. The whole opera was pretty much literally people at that opera house stormed out with revolutionary spirit. It started then. It's like an acid trip that went bad, all right? Well, good in this sense. But it seemed like it was an acid trip that went bad, and everybody just flipped out of the building and came out of the house. Like screaming for revolution because of this play. And this really, the audience stormed out of the theater, literally, and started to riot and scream and shout and protest in the streets. What a way for a nation to gain its independence from an opera. Now, it was a really good opera. I would recommend anybody to go see it. It's in French. I cannot pronounce it. Okay. They were hitting the streets. Vive la liberté. Long live liberty. Right? And one thing about this play, which it was a very special performance, and within the play itself, it takes place with King William II, or the first time, sorry. Not second. The first time. During his reign. Now, the time you get to, like, I believe, if I remember correctly, it's Act 2. And pretty much the sacred love of the fatherland is in this act. And it's bestowed upon the characters. These actors, Emmys, Grammys, Oscars, all around, boys. Your performance literally hit a whole country to go into revolution to overthrow Dutch rule. One hell of a performance. Right? And you got these Billy Irish saying, yeah, there's no illegal, it's on stolen land. That is a historical conversation. Now, she still won't more on my personal opinion as a historian. Now, the audience, pretty much at this point, you can see the audience. They all have this patriotic fever and fervor within them. Their spirit is inflamed. It become patriotic almost to the sense of nationalism because we are better than the Dutch. We're going to overthrow the Dutch. And they come out of there pretty screaming into the streets, started to riot, you know, and it started to spread all across southern Belgium, all up to the north, happened in central Belgium geographically, and people were inspired by this. And this is, you know, about the author, like about the opera itself. You know, it takes place like you have a fisherman, just a fisherman, okay? A fisherman starts to revolt against Spanish rule after his mute sister, okay? Who was wronged by the Spanish prince. It's got a little bit of romance. This is the opera. This is how she all played out. Now, you can see the themes of oppression. And you can get that connection to the opera, right? Seek a little bit of revenge against the Spanish in that opera. Okay? Now, right off the get-go, you would see themes of tyranny, oppression, right? Just a normal fisherman, a normal guy that all these guys could relate to that was sitting in the theater in this opera house. Getting oppressed. He got screwed. His sister got her tongue cut out and muted and hurt, not like by the Spanish prince. Symbolic. Now, what do you think happened nice? What happened in Minneapolis? Can you compare to that? Ooh, take that and put that around an intellectual conversation. I'm not going to give the answers to that one. But can you compare them? Yeah, you can. Very symbolic. You might have an idea how it's going to play out in the next couple months to a few years. If you know this. Okay? Well. Now, so, liberation and the Belgian Revolution, which started from a revolt into a revolution, started from opera. Awesome, right? Maybe they were just pissed. The opera sucked. They wanted their money back. Then they're like, you know what? I want my money back. You know what? Money? Yeah, we get taxed by the Dutch a lot. Yeah, screw the Dutch. Okay, screw this. This is crap. Let's go get the Dutch. Let's get our money back for the... And they go, who knows? You can run wild with what happened. I would love to have been at that theater. Standing outside in the street and watching these people come out. And literally ready to go. The revolt started after the opera ended. And it didn't stop until actually Belgium gets its independence from the Dutch. Alright? Oh yeah. Now this is the nationalism thing. It sets the stage, okay? Now, there's a lot of political grievances against Dutch rule. And within Belgium at the time, you even had religious sects. You had the Protestants. You had the Catholics, right? You had the French. You had the Dutch. You had the Belgians for languages. And the Flemish, okay? So you had a lot of possible ingredients for reasons for separation and division among the people within that geographical region. This is where nationalism at this point, the sole goal is to get rid of the Dutch. Regardless if you spoke French, regardless if you spoke Flemish, regardless Protestant or Catholic, it didn't matter within the confines. You were Belgium. You're getting ass reamed by the Dutch. We're tired of it. We want our independence. Look what they did in France. They changed their government. We can overthrow ours. We're going to take it up a notch. And that's exactly what the Belgians do. Take it up a notch. Alright? They have the shared identity. And just like the tricolored flag in France, the tricolored flag starts to wave in Belgium. Now, this symbolized with what color is the Belgian flag? Black, yellow. Anybody know the other color? Red. Pretty much like a backdrop, pretty much to the French Revolutionary flag, or the tricolored flag that the French used as well. Okay? Right? But the revolutionary ideas were a little different. Alright? They wanted self-determination, and they wanted to establish a constitutional monarchy. Free from Dutch rule, their own monarchy, the Belgians want it, and they want to be a constitutional. And they wanted to do this very well. Okay? Despite the differences, okay? Now, despite the identity, and even today, Belgium might split into two countries. It all stems back to this, by the way. Here's a little side note. Belgium's not a unified country today. This is the after effects. Because even back then, you had two different languages in Belgium, right? Now, in the south, Belgians and Sutherlanders, they felt more culturally and politically connected, but not really. More different than the Dutch in the northern Netherlands. This is what happens, okay? Now, when King William II, after Napoleon's defeat in 1815, changed everything. Okay, I just had a visitor. I had to get out of that one. Alright, now, so, where were we? Ah, yes. Now, huge difference, not even the religious aspect. But the problem was, well, there wasn't really a problem with this. Despite the differences and everything like that, the French example, you can't say that you can't set an example to somebody. I say go right straight to hell on that one. Because that's a load of shit, and it's a crock of shit. Because the French were very inspired to the Belgians to overthrow Dutch, to get their own monarchy, to get their own liberty, equality, and fertility. Now, despite all the differences, it united them as Belgians. This is what nationalism does. Now, this is where Britain comes into play later on. But Britain really sponsors the Belgians to throw the Dutch. A lot of political and economic reasons between the two. Now, they really sponsor this, really much so. Now, the opera, as you can remember, is the catalyst of the entire revolution in Belgium. That was their spark that lighted the fire. Alright? Now, you think a gunshot started the First World War. Well, an opera started the Belgian Revolution towards independence. What would be the moral of that story? To me, the moral of the story is the funniest things do happen with the greatest of rewards. You don't think, but it happens. Right? It happens. Now, I'm going to end right there for that one. We're going to go back until then. Because next time we're going to talk about the November uprising in Poland. Okay? Now, these are the major events that usually take place. Now, this happens 1830 to 1831. This is really thing because it's part of Russian history. But I'll talk about that. Now, think about the French Revolution. Remember it, as well as the Belgium. Because this is going to come up again, because we're going to have a flashback. Be like, oh, you're going to see the entire spiderweb put together. Alright? But until the next episode, it's all I have time for this one. I was supposed to bring in the November uprising in this one. But, oh, you just talk about the French July Revolution. Oh, it's a nice summer day. It is time for a revolution. We will inspire our neighbors. Don't give a shit. And the Belgians are like, hey, they don't give a shit, but they gave us an idea. And hell, that opera, prices were too high. We're hitting the streets. Either or, this is one thing, the greatest things in history and the funniest things. Now, you look at these two, the next time when we look at the uprising in Poland, you're going to be like, what? All right. Different prospect towards and what is nationalism, okay? Until then, slap libtard? No. Until then, remember, history is what you are today, and history can develop your future.